So in the 1800s, the United States during President James Monroe has adopted a foreign policy vis-a-vis the European, meaning that they will not allow any European countries to, recolonize or further colonize or have any sort of, military influence in the Americas. Hence the name Monroe. So is this operation in Venezuela the revival of that Monroe Doctrine vis-a-vis, say, China, Russia, or more so a new doctrine, sort of to say Monroe Doctrine?
Well, I mean, I don't think the Monroe Doctrine ever went away. I mean, look at the Cold War, especially in Latin America, all of these socialist revolutions were paid for and supported by the Soviet Union. And as soon as the Soviet Union sort of relinquished or like stepped away back from their funding and military support, the revolutions kind of crumbled. I mean, look at Cuba. Cuba was this big powerhouse, and then as soon as the Soviet Union stopped supplying them with military support, suddenly all of their military venues in Africa and in Latin America failed. Like, I mean, look at here's another one. What's another good one? Bolivia is a good one. Their government's not doing too well because they lost the Russian funding. Um, Syria is a great example. Look at Syria. As soon as Russia stopped supporting Bashar al-Assad's government, it fell within like a month. It's just, and also
So
it's,
you're saying that Syria did not fail because, say, I am my boy Erdogan sabotage, but it has to do with Russian. Why will the Russians stop funding something that they've been invested in for so long?
I'm not as well versed in Syria. I just know I saw, maybe it's one of those coincidences, but like after
Is
Russia.
it the Ukrainian war that keeps Russia busy?
Yeah, yeah. As they got distracted and like they removed their big base in Syria, and then the government kind of started crumbling a little bit more because it had already been crumbling, but as soon as they started removing stuff away. And I mean, look at Venezuela too. Russia hasn't really been supplying the government as much with military systems because they've been a little bit more distracted with Ukraine.
Mhm.
And with regards to the Monroe Doctrine, I mean, we saw it a lot in the Cold War, just simply because, like I said, the Soviet Union was encroaching towards the United States in Latin America. But then also it just makes sense. Why would you want foreign meddling like in your neighbors? And
Yeah,
look,
the
Russia.
Monroe Doctrine makes a quite good sense, but the case we'll have to make is if the United States, because the United States Monroe Doctrine is in practice just meant for the United States, but it's okay for the United States to say have, as the Chinese said, encircled all of or China or in Europe with the NATO military alliance. Do
Mhm.
other countries then get to, let's say, have the same privilege as the United States does with the Monroe Doctrine? Rosales.
Maybe not privilege, but when you put it this way, the the opportunity. I mean, like, Amer the United States was able to do it because we had the capability of doing it. I mean, like, Russia did the exact same thing in Chechnya and Georgia in the 2000s. I mean, they did it politically with the Baltics. Look at Belarus and all of their supporters, and
And they're doing it now with Ukraine.
they're doing it now with Ukraine. And I mean, China's taking a less military approach to it with their economic Belt and Road Initiative. Um, they certainly did it with they're trying to do it with Taiwan, but they did it with Tibet. I mean, in the 2010s, they sent a bunch of troops up the Tibet border. Um, They've been expanding their influence into Southeast Asia for quite some time. Look at their economic ties with India and Bangladesh. I mean, it's just natural. I mean, it's a natural
It's
expansion of power.
real politics.
Yeah, real politics. I
Machiavelli
mean,
would
we can
say.
do it. Why wouldn't we do it?
Yeah, Rosales, I think you wrote a paper, if I remember correctly, about the rise of China, or you had a
Mm,
debate about it. Do you think the China will do the same, will like by force, maybe since it's a growing superpower of its own, will it also adheres to that Monroe Doctrine of its own?
yeah, it's definitely something complicated to talk about because obviously, this revival, it's not like an official revival. So there's not to say that like, oh yeah, this is for sure a revival. But we do see those patterns and the parallels are clear. Today the United States wants Venezuela like or their actions with Venezuela like echoes that principle. They obviously the United States does not want their rivals to have hands on Venezuela's oil and stuff like that or gaining influence. So I think honestly it is echoing a lot of what this doctrine is, but it's obviously not an official revival.
It,
But I don't oppose it. I'm not saying for sure it's a revival, but I'm also not saying that it's not a revival. So I think obviously there's that competition between the United States and China.
that,
Um,
that Dane put the Monroe Doctrine itself in question. If, say, the United States did not, for example, allowed Russian missiles in Cuba, why would, say, Russia allow it in Ukraine? Or why will China be okay with it in Taiwan, Japan, and East Asia?
Yeah, when you put it that way, it honestly does line up with like, oh, this hemisphere we're gonna control this, and this hemisphere we control this. So honestly, it's hard to say, but it's honestly when they think about it, those leaders they think about it like, is it worth for me to intervene? What am I gonna gain from this? So it's not as simple as like, oh, they're also a powerhouse. I'm like, why don't they also intervene? Because everything, is costly, It's whether predicting and knowing and making the right decisions on whether like if it is worth that specific country stopping another specific powerhouse, whether if that's the correct movement for the country, it's hard to say, but as Avery said, I do believe the United States did do it because they did have the power to do it. I think there's very few countries or nations or coalitions that can really stop the United States. I think it's hard to say that you know, even if this was really quick and honestly I think it was that's why it surprised me, I think Donald Trump continues to surprise me
Yeah, on the
as
point of Trump, you said you're not sure if it is the revival or not of the Monroe Doctrine. Is it and actually Professor Mearsheimer agrees with you. He said for the Monroe Doctrine, like Venezuela does not possess any security threat, doesn't have like say Russian troops. It doesn't, possess any meaningful security threat to the United States. Then
Mhm.
if it's not the Monroe Doctrine, which is what the Monroe Doctrine about, if it's not about the Monroe Doctrine, is it a Donroe Doctrine?
Oh, what? A
And
Donro? Like,
Donroe Doctrine, like Trump's version of the Monroe
okay.
Doctrine?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess it could be. I mean, I think it's different, different in the sense that it's not specifically now to Europe, but also, Asia and stuff like that. So I guess you can say the Donald Doctrine. I guess you can say that. I mean, I think it's a new way of painting of what is going on, but it's not an official thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
One more
And
comment I want to make about the Monroe Doctrine is that if you look at the circumstance, specifically that doctrine came after the Spanish-American Civil Wars, where the
Mhm.
United States had I put liberated in quotation marks, but they had gained new colonies, let's say, in the Caribbean and in Latin America. And whereas the doctrine itself specifically states that it's to prevent military incursion from Europe to America, if you look at the aftermath of the wars, these new colonies or spheres of American influence were became major economic powerhouses for America's economic growth that it saw in the 19th century. And I would say that there's similarities in that because with Venezuela, as you see, um, you can kind of argue it both ways. Trump officials argue that, well, it's already our oil because we put all of these American co oil companies in before Chavez took over the country. And in a way, yes, it is, I guess, securing our assets, but at the same time, there is still some security threat. I mean, it's not like an immediate threat. It's more of an economic threat from China because they just proposed their huge um, oil their their oil bill with Venezuela. I don't remember the amount. I just saw one figure stated that like the Venezuelan government still owes like $10 billion to China's government. And another thing too is that there's Chinese delegations that were actually in Venezuela when the attack was
That's
commencing.
crazy. So
So everyone was joking. It's like, oh no, the Chinese delegation is stuck in Caracas right now. That was pretty funny.
yeah, switching gears to legality and international law. Um, as we know, yesterday there was a, UN assembly about the Venezuelan operation. Do you think, Avery, is this operation legal under international law? And what about Venezuela's sovereignty?
It's a it's a hard thing to argue to say. I mean, the biggest comparisons I saw was with regards to the way that this was done would be Venezuela and Libya. Not Venezuela, would be Panama and Libya.
Well, that was also not legal under international law.
Yes, it was not technically legal on the international sta scale, but at the same time, the main UN European countries largely benefited from that. I mean,
I
it's kind
mean,
of like a sh
about
it's
Libya, it was not it was a joint NATO
yeah,
operation.
it was a joint NATO
Yeah, so
operation,
the
and
Europeans were actively involved there.
yeah, and Obama didn't receive Congress's support to supply the coalition or the rebels with munitions or to carry out the bombings. I mean, and at the same time too, like with Panama, I remember reading that after the the operation was carried out, the UN I forget who initiated it, but the UN tried to pass a resolution condemning the US, and it was immediately vetoed by the
US.
US, France, and the UK because they benefited from it. And I mean, like the European Union has long been saying that they oppose Maduro, and the
That didn't
UN has
that didn't
condemned
put
his human rights violations. I mean, part of it too is politics, where it'd be like, well, Trump just did this. We don't like Trump, so of course we're going to condemn it because he did it.
that then puts the whole UN system into question. How could you like be you know, the judge and like in your own trial, like you're the person on
Yeah,
trial and you're the one
exactly.
controlling.
Mhm.
Rosales, given that the UN Charter has gave all head of states immunity from such arrest, is this operation under legal under international law?
Yeah, I mean, from an international law perspective, the U.S. operation in Venezuela is like obviously very, very, very questionable. I think invading another country without, uh, without consent and stuff like that, violates, sovereignty. So I think it's another very complicated thing to talk about. But it's very hard to say what will happen. I actually did not see what the UN put out, but I think it's very hard to say exactly what will happen, especially since, when you're part of some a coalition like that, it's just like,
Well, usually the UN gives out, a strongly worded condemnation. This
Yeah.
time we didn't even get the strongly worded
I
condemnation,
think I saw
but
their
a
new
strongly worded opinions.
yeah, it's just like, hey, do not do that. All right, bye.
the UN's
Yeah.
new spokesperson. I think he put out a statement yesterday or something like that. It's like, oh, we stand with the Venezuelan people and like the sovereignty of Venezuela, but it's like you
Yeah.
haven't
Yeah,
done
but it's
anything.
it's not really nothing, and that's why it's very hard. And also that also adds to like what Avery said, like the United States did it because they can do it, you know? It's because how I said it, it's like almost like they're for that action they weren't gonna be held accountable or anything like that. I think it's another thing the United States is gonna get away with. But obviously it's hard to say whether if the UN will do anything or not.
So you're saying
Um,
it's illegal under international law, but the US will, in a way just get away with it, as it always does.
Yeah, I'm not a legal international law expert, but by the way I'm seeing it in terms of morality, I think yeah. Yeah, I would assume so.
So is there a double standard given that the Europeans are yet to, like where if Russia violates another country's sovereignty vis-a-vis Ukraine, European condemnation is outright. If China does the same, the response will be the same. But when the United States does it, there's a bit of a skepticism. Is there like a double standard?
Yeah, I United States is definitely the favorite child, obviously, but yeah, I mean, yeah, I would say so, yeah. There's no question about it. I feel
Every, to my absolute shock, Viktor Orban, our boy of Hungary, has said that this has set you know, a dangerous precedent, which then, begs the question is, does this set a dangerous precedent whereby the United States or say Russia, China, or other countries will use this, and carry and justify to carry, similar operation and try to justify it in the same way the United States does or did?
I would say no. The precedent has always existed. I mean, like Libya is the prime example of this. Uh, People condemned Obama for it, but then like, oh, you can't talk about that, all that stuff because no one liked Gaddafi. No one really liked Gaddafi. I mean, the double
Except me.
standard. Yeah, maybe some people liked him. Some people liked him. I don't really have too many strong feelings about him. But the double standard exists because of benefit. I mean, like the European Union isn't really going to care whether or not Maduro's in power or not because they weren't buying oil from Venezuela. Venezuela. I mean, it's it's just talk. They're saying uh, like of course Orban is going to say this because he doesn't
And
like
he's got a very good relationship with Trump. I was actually shocked to hear that.
He has a good relationship with Trump. He has a good relationship with Putin. I think he has good relationship with Xi Jinping as well. But the,
Is that, like a school guy, that is friends with everyone?
yeah, but I mean, like Orban is also like he's kind of harmless, you know. He's not really doing anything crazy. He's just like people condemn him because like oh he hasn't had like free and fair elections in a while. The world is a different place. I mean, you can certainly argue that hey Maduro was a dictator and he did all this stuff, but he's not comparable to like say Gaddafi, where he was like executing all political opposition and like leading an leading like an empire of anti-Western terrorist organizations. I mean, like the world is a different place. We don't have too many like crazy dictators
Speaking of
that
presidents, Um, Trump did not just stop on Venezuela. His rhetoric has been Colombia, has been Mexico, saying quote unquote, the Venezuelan president does not run the country. The country is run by cartels. So that
Mhm.
gives him, and he said actually something need to be done about Mexico. And not to mention, I don't know about you guys, but I don't sleep too early lately because, I don't want to miss the invasion of Greenland. So does this set
Yeah.
a precedence for such things? Because Trump's doesn't just speaks. Now, Trump's actually follows through. He doesn't,
Mhm.
as you say, guys in America, he doesn't just talk the talk, he walk the walk. Is he walking it?
Hmm.
He's definitely walking it. I mean, I'd argue he's playing it smart with Venezuela because, you know, you knock off Maduro, he doesn't really have like extreme support from anyone except really like China and maybe Iran. We saw like China put out a strongly worded statement, not even from Xi Jinping, it was from like from the ambassador to Venezuela. He put out a statement condemning it, and then I don't think Iran has said anything. Um,
Well, nobody cares
with
what Iran says anyways.
yeah, they've got their Twitter pages and all that stuff that may or may not be run by
The regime,
them.
if it has anything to say, let it survive this, recent uprisings. They're trying so hard to overturn it.
Yeah,
So they're
yeah,
trying to hold grip of power themselves. So last thing
we'll
they
s-
want is
we'll see how Iran goes. But with regards to say Colombia and Mexico, um, I would say I'm hesitant to say that something will happen just because the reaction is going to be a lot more severe. However,
how severe can it be other than strongly worded condemnation? Let's say what is Colombia or Mexico can do? What is the international system that we have seen? I mean, if it felt in Ukraine, if it felt in Venezuela, if it felt in all of those places we mentioned, how can we expect it to work in, say, Mexico or Colombia if it is?
with Mexico and Colombia, I'm not worried about the international reaction. I'm worried about the local reaction because Mexico and Colombia, with regards to their cartels and irregular government forces, are a whole other beast than Venezuela. Venezuela, you can argue there's cartel involvement. Colombia and Mexico, it is a very well-known fact. Um, if we were to step in and like dispose the Mexican or Colombian government, it wouldn't really do anything because they've been um, I'm hesitant to say they've been allowing the cartels to operate, but I mean, they haven't really done anything to stop it. I mean, with regards to Mexico, you see, oh, well, it just happens that like five major opposition parties just happen to die from cartel activities before and after the election. Like, come on.
Rosales, what's your take? Is this the new normal?
Yeah, I feel like in terms of Mexico, it's a very complicated thing because I know most people, you've seen protests around cities like Mexico City where they specifically are really like discomforted and upset with what President Sheinbaum is doing. So it's very that I feel like that's a whole different discussion on itself. But I feel going back to the precedent question, I think that it could set a dangerous precedent. You know, if the U.S. captures a leader, foreign leader, and then claims it to be, and their claims are like justifications for what they're doing, it could set a precedent for other countries to act, or even the U.S. itself can keep doing this, you know? Um, but I think in terms of Mexico, I don't know too much about Colombia specifically, but in Mexico, um, I feel like it was just a threat. Maybe like not even a threat on that sense, but rather like it was just like, hey guys, you saw what I did, you better stop. But I don't think genuinely Donald Trump would do something to specifically the country of Mexico because there's so much trade and so much relation. You know, it's a
And
neighboring
with the
country.
migration that he's trying to tackle, if the war broke out in Mexico, people are just gonna jump off the face, and then he's gonna have to deal with it.
You're right. So I think in Venezuela it made sense because they're obviously not as equally armed as a country like Mexico, and it's not a bordering country to them. I don't know what to say about Colombia. I think only saw that the president of Colombia said or about what the same thing Maduro said, like, "Hey, come find me," like. But so I don't know what's gonna go on. I don't know if he genuinely is gonna go into Colombia, but I think it's important to think about that Colombia and Mexico, their resources are they're self-sufficient for their country, but I don't think it's an absurd amount where the United States, they're gonna be like wanting to enter that country because of their vast amount of resources. And I'm pretty sure Venezuela's
I'll tell
country
you a country that they will really want to enter. Um, Greenland. And shortly after this
This
operation,
is very recent, no?
yeah, after this operation, Stephen Miller's wife, Katie, has posted on Twitter saying Greenland on an American flag saying soon. So, and the Greenlandish people, even the Greenland leader said enough is enough. The Danish prime minister said that Article 5 must be implemented, the NATO whole thing, like, Denmark being a NATO country. So is he really first going to go into Greenland? And if it happened, will that be the demise of the so-called North Atlantic Treaty Alliance?
Yeah, that's very complicated. I mean, it seems like it's very hard to say, especially now what they're gonna do about it. But I do see a lot of people saying that if the United States could do something like that to Venezuela, what is it to say they can't do it to somebody like a country like Greenland or Denmark or that you know?
No, they want
Um
nothing to do with Denmark. They just want Greenland.
oh wait,
Hmm.
sorry, I'm a
No,
bit
you're good. But like Greenland is basically Danish, under Danish.
okay.
So you're not so wrong. Avery, what do you think?
Um, I would say it would definitely be unwise. It would be very much unwise.
Yeah.
Like I said with Venezuela, you could Trump can get away with it because no one really cares. And I mean, like, um, it can also do it. With Greenland, a lot more Europe is going to care a whole lot more about that, and there's going to be a lot
Europe,
more pushback.
Europe gonna do anything? Let's say if the whole mighty United States takes over Greenland. You think what do you think the European can do? If they need
More
the
strongly
United
worded
States,
condemnation.
if they need the United States to counter Russia, to protect them from Russia, what do you think fighting a double front war will be for them?
It it wouldn't be. I mean, like NATO would lose like all of its funding from the US. You would have a lot more. Well, I mean,
So
if we're on that topic,
If you're Trump, you're already not a big fan of the NATO thing. You're trying as much to stop the Ukraine war so you can pivot to Russia and to Asia because that is where the big dog is, China, which the United States views as a more of a security threat than um, Russia is. Given China's huge economic wealth, military and technological advances. So if like why will you not take Greenland? Greenland, you have a very, big land, you have a lot of resources.
you got the fishing industry, you can counter China with that.
Yeah. You by taking it, you get rid of your bad children, and you also get like cherry on the top Greenland.
Yeah. Um, yeah. Well, I mean, if we're comparing it to Venezuela, at least with Venezuela, you have a large population that supports the the removal of the government. With Greenland, I think like yeah, the support has kind of waned just because like maybe people have lost interest. Like last year, you could have argued that more Greenlanders supported the initiative, but now it's definitely changed. And also, yeah, like you're saying, like what is the EU going to do? They're gonna sanction trade when they bow down to basically every tariff that the US put on them. There's not really much they can do. They're not going to start a war because they lose their NATO funding,
I think
and they've already been cutting back on their military spending and funding over the past couple years.
we're ignoring the elephant in the room. Why don't we address it? Canada. What about Rosales? What about Canada?
I don't know, man. Like, oh, sorry. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's a very another. I don't think
interesting.
Canada because it's
Oh,
also a neighboring country, but Greenland. I have no idea if I'm gonna be
this
honest
is so
with you
much for
guys.
you to process, isn't it?
Yeah, as far as I know, I had only just seen about the news like very, very recently. I mean, I know this is all recent, but probably a bit more. I'm only very like vaguely informed more than you guys, but yeah, I have no idea. I don't think Canada would be something that the US would get into. Um,
Yeah.
uh, as for Greenland, it's hard to say, especially I don't know too much about the people also. So I don't know if they oppose their
If
government
you
or
are
what they're
Canada,
going through.
if you're Canada, and you have the world's largest, impact and strongest, country in history of humanity right next door, doesn't it make more sense for you to be part of it than say to be like, does you understand where I'm going at? Like,
You're saying from a
why would
Canadian point of view,
and
right?
yeah, and Canadians historically they don't have much animosity with the Americans, and they said, "Oh, we love Americans." If they love Americans so much, why wouldn't they want to be part of it? And
I
no,
don't know. In my opinion, I remember when President Trump said that for all of Canada to be the 51st state or something like that. If he said that he wanted Canada, I feel like that's just him talking, but as a
no, from Canadian perspective.
from a Canadian perspective, I don't think you can socialize what they generally believe on Americans and America as a country to apply to the whole people because Canada's a big country, it has a lot of people. So it's it's very hard to say whether if they will oppose it or if they're in favor of it. Um so
And most of that huge population you mentioned are liberals. Canada is a very liberal country. If it
Yeah.
becomes part of the United States, that will politically hurt the Republican Party.
y-
So why like I don't know why are they missing that point?
If if I can jump
Yes.
in, I used to live next to Canada for a couple of years. If I remember correct, wasn't it like was it Quebec that wanted to have more relationship with the US? I remember it was the one section because Canada's weird where they have like Quebec, which
Yeah,
is the
Quebec
French
is the part
Canadians.
mm,
that mostly want to
Yeah. They
they want to
wanted
use
to
that
be
word.
separate because they didn't like the liberal policies of the Canadian government as a whole. And I mean, also, if you look at Canada's perspective, they're still one of the world's like large they have like one of the world's largest reservoirs of oil, and they're one of the world's major exporters of timber. They have a lot of trade going for them, and they re-strengthened their economic ties with the EU because of the tariffs recently. Um, it's and they have a large standing military too. I mean, like Canadian citizens themselves don't have access to guns because of the government, but their military is still very much strong.
And perhaps they don't want to give away their free healthcare system.
Yeah, as great as it is,
Okay.
as great as we've seen the waiting lists on their healthcare systems, all that stuff, like, yeah. There's all I'll say is that there's definitely Canadians who would like to be maybe not be part of the United States, but have a lot closer relationship with the United States because of politics. And there are definitely those that don't, because Canada has a similar political system where it's very much a two-party liberal and conservative divide. The Canadian conservatives are very much similar in vein to the American conservatives, just as the Canadian liberals are pretty similar to the American liberals.
Rosales, just briefly, if you're Putin and Trump calls you always stop the war, stop the Ukraine war, and you say no, no. So now, isn't it your turn to call Trump and say stop the Venezuelan war? And maybe Trump will say no.
I mean, yeah, I guess so. I mean, if you're having your opposition do things and tell you that you can't do any of these things, I think it's yeah, I mean, I feel like it's a one-way thing. Hey, if you said I can't do this and you
In a way,
can't do
doesn't it
that.
diminishes America's credibility for, rule-based order? If you are actively doing the same, how can you say call Russia and tell them stop the Ukrainian war? Or how can you say to China, oh, you can't have Taiwan?
Yeah, I think the United States really justifies their whole like model, like, oh, this is for democracy and stuff like that. I feel like that is like a very like they use that as a big justification of what they're doing because those painted in red are bad, you know? So I think it has to
It's
do with
basically
that.
rule for thee, not for me.
Yes, exactly. Like, yeah, I can do this, but you guys cannot. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well said. Well, we'll end it there. Thank you so much, guys. Again, it was a really very productive conversation. I will love to have you again to discuss many more issues.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I look
Yeah, of
forward to it.
course. Thank you so much for inviting me and Avery.
Of
Yeah,
course.
thank you.